Okay, so hello, my name is Daniel. Today we're going to present to you our project, Decentralized Finance, or DeFi in short. It's part of the blockchain technology minor. First, we're going to start with our contents. So, can you switch the slide? Oh, okay, thank you. First, we're going to talk about DeFi Overview. Then we're going to cover the different types of protocol, namely the lending and borrowing protocols, automated market makers, and yield aggregators. And in the end, we're going to summarize all of it. And now I'll give the word to Asim.
Hello, everyone. I'm Asim. I'm doing Decentralized Finance Overview, so DeFi Overview. First of all, what is decentralized finance? DeFi is an emerging financial technology based on secure distributed ledgers similar to those used by cryptocurrencies. The system removes the control banks and institutions have on money, financial products, and financial services. To understand DeFi better and how it works, it helps to understand how centralized finance differs from decentralized finance. In centralized finance, your money is held by banks, corporations whose overarching goal is to make money. The financial system is full of third parties who facilitate money movement between parties, which each charging fees for using their services. This whole process costs an unnecessary amount of time and money. Other cons about centralized finance are all other financial transactions cost money, such as lending and borrowing. Loan applications can take days to be approved. You might not even be able to use your bank services when you're abroad. Decentralized finance eliminates intermediaries by allowing people, merchants, and businesses to conduct financial transactions through emerging technology. This is accomplished through peer-to-peer financial networks that use security protocols. Security protocols, connectivity, software, and hardware advancements. From anywhere you have an internet connection, you can lend, trade, and borrow using software that records and verifies financial transactions, financial actions in distributed financial databases. A distributed database is accessible across various locations. It collects and aggregates data from all users and uses a consensus mechanism to verify it. Decentralized finance uses this technology to eliminate centralized finance models by enabling anyone to use financial services anywhere, regardless of who and where they are. Next slide, please. Now we have some DeFi projects from the past, so DeFi history. In 2015, we have Maker. Maker is a protocol that allows for creating a decentralized stablecoin, a DAI. The project was formed in 2015 by Rune Christensen, who was inspired by another project, BitShares blockchain, created by Dan Larimer. Development of Maker was funded by venture capital and was eventually launched at the end of 2017. At 2016, we have Ether Delta. Ether Delta was one of the first decentralized exchanges built on the Ethereum that allowed for permissionless exchange of ERC20 tokens. The exchange was based on the order book. As we know, building order book exchanges on layer 1 is hard and usually results in a poor user experience. Despite that, Ether Delta was one of the most popular exchanges for trading different ERC20 tokens, especially during the ICO era. Unfortunately, the exchange was hacked at the end of 2017. The hacker gained access to Ether Delta front end and proxied the traffic to a phishing site, scamming the users for around 800K. On top of this, the founder of Ether Delta was charged by the SEC for running an unregulated security exchange in 2018, which was pretty much a nail in the coffin. After that, we have Uniswap in 2018 and Binance, one of the most known projects on DeFi is Binance DEX in 2019. That was my part, and for the next part we have Ademi. Oh, sorry, we have Daniel with the lending and borrowing protocols.
Awesome. Okay, so now I'm gonna talk about lending and borrowing protocols. These are one of the most popular functionalities of DeFi. Their popularity has skyrocketed since 2020, when the summer of 2020, the so-called summer of 2020, occurred. It also contributed to the big rise of Ethereum's price, because most projects are based on the Ethereum network, so they use the smart contracts, ERC20 technology. And the main purpose is that users who invest or own cryptocurrencies don't want them to sit just like that. They want to earn interest, just as they do with other types of assets. So what these protocols do is they're decentralized, so their code is the source of regulation of supply and demand. It works on the principles of economic principles of supply and demand. And how it differs from traditional finance, lending and borrowing is, in that case, in traditional finance, you have bond markets, or for example, you go to the bank to get a mortgage to finance a home, and the specifics of that loan is going to be dependent on what your credit score is, for example, or basically how credit worthy are you. And you need to provide income statements and all sort of stuff, all etc., like stuff like that. And in DeFi, it doesn't matter who you are. You don't do it like peer-to-peer, as in traditional finance. You do it user to contract. What this means is that funds are pooled from lenders, and then those funds are distributed to borrowers. And the dynamics of the interest rates is determined by the supply and demand. And now we're gonna show you some examples. For lending, the example is on the compound protocol. So here we have, for example, Ethereum, 100 Ethereum. We can exchange that for compound's seed token. In this case, it's going to be CETH. And I have assumed that the market exchange rate is going to be 3%. So we divide the 100 Ethereum by the 3%. We get 3,333 CETH. And assuming that the exchange rate goes up in 6 months' time, but it becomes 3.1%, and we want to redeem our ETH, and we exchange that same amount of 3,333 CETH, and we're going to get back 103 Ethereum. So in that 6 month time, and for the sake of this example, we're going to have a return of 3.33%. And how this differs from, for example, Aave, which is the other popular lending and borrowing protocol, that in that case, you receive a token, which is pegged like 1-to-1. For example, you stake 1 ETH and you get 1 ETH's worth of their a token, and you just receive distributions periodically. Whereas here you need to exchange it, and that's when actually you get your return. And for borrowing example, this time I'm going to use the stablecoin DAI. So for example, we have 100 DAI, and again, using the exchange rate of 3%, we're going to receive the equivalent of that in CDAI, which is going to be 3,333 again. And we're going to stake that. amount to receive more DAI. And in this case, it's going to have a collateral factor of 0.5. The collateral factor is basically the loan to value amount. In this case, 50%. So we receive 50 DAI. You can do whatever you want with that. And when time comes to repay back the loan, you exchange it 50 DAI to get back the 3,333 compound DAI. And if that at that time, if the market exchange rate is different, and most probably it's going to be different, again, I'm going to assume that it goes up to 3.1%. You're going to exchange those 3,333 compound DAI to receive the 103 DAI, which is basically, again, you get a return on your initial deposit, and also you've had the ability to use the leverage provided, but that also depends on market dynamics. It could go up and can go down, so it's a risk to consider. Okay, and now I'm going to give the word to Ademi, who's going to talk more about automated market makers.
Thank you, Daniel. So, third part is automated market makers. In this presentation, we're going to look how automated market makers work and why they're so popular. Also, we'll look at the liquidity providers, liquidity pools, and some pros and cons of automated market makers. So, basically, automated market makers, they're a type of decentralized exchange protocol for trading digital assets using algorithms instead of order books. Also, automated market makers, they facilitate permissionless token swaps without intermediaries, so which means without third parties. Instead, automated market makers, they use smart contracts, oracles, liquidity providers, and liquidity pools. In addition, automated market makers are now essential part of the decentralized finance ecosystem and are changing how buyers and sellers interact between each other. So in the next slide, we can see the smart contracts. The idea of smart contracts dates back to Nick Szabo. He's the computer scientist, and in his report, which were written in 1994, smart contracts, like explained in a deeply way. If you want to read it, you can go and search for it. So basically, smart contracts, there are simple programs stored on a blockchain that run when predetermined conditions are met. They typically are used to automate and the execution of an agreement so that all the participants can be immediately certain of the outcome without any third parties involvement or time loss. And as an interesting fact, the first ever blockchain that leveraged the smart contract tech was Ethereum, that has started in July 2015 after a year of active development. And in next slide, the main part is like how the automated market maker works. So this here in the picture, you can see the mathematical formula, which is used in Uniswap and countless other automated market makers uses. So which is basically means X multiplied by Y equal to K. In this case, X means that the quantity of one token in a pool, and Y represents the other token, and K is basically like constant in this formula, so the total liquidity within a pool always remains the same. There are several adaptations and variations of this formula for specific use cases. However, what makes them alike is that they will determine asset prices algorithmically. Some decentralized exchanges facilitate traders directly between users and wallets. Basically, you can think of these types of traders as peer-to-peer transaction between buyers and sellers. However, decentralized exchanges that execute transactions using automated market makers, they're effectively P2C transactions, which is peer-to-contract. These contracts occur without traditional order books or counterparties, but still the smart contracts used in automated market makers need liquidity in order to function. This is where liquidity pools and liquidity providers come in. In the next page, you can see that liquidity pool works as a backbone of any DeFi platform, be it decentralized exchange such as Uniswap or Swap or SushiSwap, a lending platform such as Maker, Compound. And liquidity pools is a collection of funds locked in a smart contract on a DeFi platform where anyone can deposit their assets and receive reward in exchange for providing liquidity to the platform. For example, this with the help of an example, decentralized exchange like Uniswap. So anyone can provide liquidity to Uniswap by depositing their funds into Uniswap's liquidity pool. And then the person depositing the asset is known as a liquidity provider, as you see in the picture. So further traders use Uniswap to buy or sell crypto tokens. And in exchange for that, Uniswap charges a trading fee. Uniswap distributes this trading fee to its liquidity providers as a reward for providing liquidity to the platform. And next part is advantages of automated market makers. There are 5 advantages: decentralization, no related to incarceration, there is no tampering, security, and the existence of a token based on decentralized exchanges are decentralized. The main one important is decentralization, so smart contracts are valid and enforceable that operate independently by performing orders. If we move to the disadvantages part, there are 4 main disadvantages. First one is liquidity constraints controlled marketplaces. Second is less efficient order execution as compared to the equivalent. Third one is slippage and volume. And fourth one is fees. If we explain and focus on one of them, for example, slippage and volume, so the traffic on the decentralized exchange has risen, but without an order book and market maker, consumers experience considerable slippage, especially with big orders. This is the end of the automated market makers. I'm giving my word to the next presenter.
So the yield aggregators were one of the most notable applications of the DeFi technology. This concept was seen as a way to earn passive income from the assets which would be unprofitable in other conditions and cases. The basic idea behind the yield aggregator is that it is a set of smart contracts or protocols that pools the funds of an investor and then invest them into a variety of products or services that can potentially produce some yield. In principle, the yield aggregator acts like a protocol-driven personal investment banker that can be programmed based on your risk appetite or industry preferences, which will automatically execute the protocols where to one onto another to generate maximum returns. The key components of yield farming are the yield, other DeFi protocols, and tokens. Yield farming relies on them because they make the structure and make this process possible. The yield is a central figure in yield farming and yield aggregators. It is the most wished goal for every farmer, and it comes from the continuous process of lending, borrowing, the liquidity mining, and the sharing of revenue and resources. The term yield can be described as a total amount of net profit produced from an investment, and it is often measured in the annual percentage yield, shortly APY, which can be defined as the real rate of return earned on an investment, taking into account the effect of compounding interest and the fees coming from the yield aggregator. The yield itself stands on 3 core principles, which is a borrowing demand, which can be defined as leverage schemes occurring in the crypto loans market. It is also the liquidity mining, and it is the revenue sharing. It also relies on the other DeFi protocols, where the other DeFi protocols being the lending and borrowing platforms described earlier, and automated market makers, which were also described earlier. Also, tokens play one of the major roles in yield farming because they are a form of protocols that are responsible for the mechanism and the concept of work of yield aggregators. Uh, uh, and these are the stable coins, the lending platform interest-bearing tokens, the AAM liquidity provider OP tokens, and the native governance tokens. Next one, please. So strategies and votes. In the topic of yield farming, the smart contracts which combine different strategies, basically the protocols are called the votes. The vote is the yield aggregator program to maximize the user's rate of return. A large variety of strategies which can be embedded within the vote vary enormously, from simple ones which seek for the most optimal interest rate to very complex ones where the protocol borrows assets in order to leverage other positions time after time. And the figure shown below shows a typical yield aggregator use case. Starting from the top left, the investor chooses his vote of preference to deposit his savings. The vote, a smart contract, will run its preset strategy. Simple staking, lending, or providing liquidity are just examples. More complex strategies combine all of them and involve multiple steps and protocols. Next one, please. So, analyzing the aggregator's fees. The cash flow incoming from the vote is determined by the financial and technical performance of the vote. This means that apart from the protocol efficiency, the investor is also regulated by the commission fee of the yield aggregator, which is basically means you're getting taxed for the execution of profitable protocols. Total yield of an investor can be determined by calculating the vote's total profit, subtracting the protocol's fee. However, different aggregators apply different interest rates. For example, Yearn Finance requires a performance fee of 20%, but also a 2% management fee. Pico Finance has 20%, while Harvest has the highest of them all, 30%. However, it uses a portion of its fees to buy back its own native tokens in order to distribute them. Next one, please. Now I will describe the yield farming strategies. Every yield farming strategy is made up of specifically set protocols, which automatically farm yield on the basis of modular smart contracts, acting in combination with each other. Earlier, when the technology was only in the young stages, we could only use one pool or specifically one vote who could execute one simple strategy. Now, however, we can employ multiple strategies simultaneously within one single pool. So strategy one of the most common ones is simple lending. So it's basically the depositing assets in the lending protocol, accruing supply interest and collecting native tokens over time, and then withdrawing the deposits with accrued supply interest. The simplest lending strategy is the low-risk one and does not imply much return. However, due to the fact that losses might occur only under extreme conditions on the market, it is being the safest option out of all three. Overall, the strategy is shown to be most stress-resistant and the least volatile to embed into the investment portfolio. Next one, please. So, strategy 2, the leverage borrow. It is basically depositing assets into the protocol, borrow assets, then borrow the assets, repeating this process multiple times, then accruing interest and collecting native tokens, swapping the native tokens, repaying the loans, and withdrawing the deposits when it's needed. This strategy relies on the implementation and usage of leveraging spirals. This is possible because of the platform's great stimulation of both lenders and borrowers by awarding tokens to both groups of users. So such platforms as Compound get a sufficient additional liquidity on the marketplace. The more spirals the aggregator undertakes, the higher shares it holds the both lending and borrowing sides. However, despite leveraging spirals being a more effective yield strategy, in the situations where collateral asset differs in value from the borrowed one, there's a rise of additional liquidity risks. Next one, please. And strategy 3 is liquidity provision, where it's basically providing assets as liquidity in the AMM pool, then collecting native tokens, then withdrawing the liquidity. Further investment into the automated maker pool increases the value of the yield aggregator, so it is going to grow proportionally to the growth in the AM pool and the yield aggregator value. Being the most risky strategy, it is also the most offering one in terms of returns. However, the withdrawal of funds negatively affects the total amount of savings that can be extracted from the pool without loss of value. Next slide, please.
Yes, back to me. We're done with the parts, with the chapters, and now we have a small summary for you. For the first chapter, lending and borrowing protocols, a few important points here. Decentralized protocol, code regulated based on supply and demand, collateral needed with LTV ranging from 50 to 75%. My friend Daniel already told you there is a big difference in the lending and borrowing protocols between the decentralized and the centralized finance. For the automated market makers, I have a small summary. Vitalik Buterin was the first to introduce automated market makers in 2017. As Adami told already, the first AMM models were introduced 4 years later. They not only dramatically improved the capabilities of existing decentralized exchanges, but they also enabled DeFi in the first place. One of the primary reasons why market players migrated to DeFi in the first place was the attractive incentives for supplying liquidity. As a result, the next course focuses on mining liquidity and crop cultivation, two fundamental strategies for making passive revenue in DeFi. Both work in the same way, but there are significant distinctions that need a tutorial dedicated to them. For the last part, the yield aggregators. Yield aggregators combine different strategies to maximize investors' rate of return, similar to POFs and DAX's protocols. Smart contracts have a central role. Commonly, smart contracts are referred to as vaults in this domain. Different vaults run different strategies. These strategies can be straightforward, such as ending the best lending protocol interest rate, or more complex as borrowing assets and leveraging some other position by exploiting different protocols. For example, there are a plethora of solutions. One of the advantages of these yield aggregators is yield farmers do not have to actively compose their own strategy, but they can make use of the workflows invented by other users, turning the investment strategy from active to a more passive approach with the need for extensive knowledge about the underlying protocols. They also have one big disadvantage, and that's the general investment rule. The more you invest, the higher the returns are, but also the higher the chances to lose your investments. With this said, I want to thank you for listening to our presentation. Here we have our resources list. These are other resources we used for this presentation, and I want to thank you all for listening.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Sorry.